Prime Minister had National Cabinet again today. I think it's a boondoggle of a process myself, because he is lowering, in my view, the position as the national leader to the level of state premiers. And while the Prime Minister is trying to remain calm, and you know, enormous kudos to Scott Morrison for remaining calm, because I feel like I'd like to wrench a few people's heads off with some of the ways some of these premiers are acting. He is showing the demeanour we need at this stage. But the premiers, well, the premiers are still back to their stock in trade, with the exception of probably Gladys Berejiklian, who seems to be the most in control premier that we have anywhere in Australia right now. Probably Peter Goodwin would be second. I mean, it's an island, Tasmania, and it's easy to understand how you'd isolate it, but at least Berejiklian is keeping the borders open to the best possible way and trying to keep the massive New South Wales economy working as best as it possibly can. But everyone else is into this business of peddling fear. They're offering distraction. They're offering, in fact, deception. And the reason I say deception is, why is it, for instance, in the Queensland situation, where the Prime Minister is begging the Queensland Premier, who thinks she's the Prime Minister, to actually open the borders up a little bit more to make it possible for people to do decent things that are normally guaranteed, normal things, like if you have a baby at, say, Grafton Hospital and the baby has a problem, you end up on the Gold Coast because it's the nearest, best senior hospital. The parents can't follow the baby. There is all of this sort of insanity, this indignity. And it's all playing into the hands of premiers who are motivated about their electoral prospects. It's real simple. It is really simple. Let's talk about coronavirus and COVID-19 and border restrictions, anything other than their abilities as a government. Let's talk about anything in the Queensland context other than, say, Jackie Trad or the problems that Palaszczuk will be facing over her own leadership. I don't think she'll be Premier for too much longer, even if she wins the election. And, of course, the whole thing is a nonsense. There is no proper contrast in the response to this coronavirus, now in the second wave of lockdowns, or is it the third wave of lockdowns occurring in Victoria? When you think about last year's flu seasons, hundreds of Queenslanders died of flu last year. Thousands, no doubt, around Australia died of flu last year. Did we shut the borders down? Where's the contrast? There isn't any. Then we could talk about people who die on the roads. No one took the cars off the roads last year when hundreds of people died on roads, and they're still sadly dying now. The wrenching effect of this border shutdown on people's personal psyche, as well as their liberty, their personal businesses, their family unity, is an enormously high price to pay. And this is where Scott Morrison, I thought, nailed it today about the question of the economy versus the health thing. And what we've really got now is the health boffins are in charge of the economy, and the economy is sick. That's what's happened. It's extraordinary stuff, extraordinary stuff. You see, nobody, it seems, at the premier levels around this country has actually read the Australian Constitution. Nobody actually understands. And one of the reasons we federated back in 1901 was the pressures from the colonies in those days for free trade across the border. The fact that you couldn't actually charge an entry fee to go from one state to another was one of the things that was guaranteed in the Constitution, that you could not restrict movement across the border. And yet you've got farmers on one side of the border in Victoria who've got property on the other side of the border in New South Wales, paying their taxes, paying their fees, being told to put combine harvesters onto aircraft or bales of hay, dozens and dozens and dozens of bales of hay, and fly them to Sydney and then truck them down from Sydney if they're on the Victorian side of the border. I mean, this is beyond insane. This is an ego-driven control trip that these premiers are on. And the worst part about it is, as so many in the media keep talking about it being unprecedented times, let me tell you, there are plenty of precedents in history of this sort of action. Plenty of precedents where we've seen people who've been despotic in their control of everyday people's lives, who've gone on and done things such as control the parliament, change the legislation, make it possible that you can no longer be guaranteed the contract you had is actually worth the paper it's written on, all of those sorts of things. We've seen plenty of examples of that in the last 100 years. Look at what happened in Europe in the times of Hitler. He got elected first off, then he thought, no, I won't worry about elections anymore. There's plenty of other examples around, plenty of others. So each of the precedents for these unprecedented times are pretty ugly indeed. And we should all, as Australians tonight, rejoice with the fact that we have an Australian Defence Force. Because I've got to tell you, if it was still the way it was in the colonial days, that each colony raised their own army, we would probably right now be almost at war. There would be tanks at the borders, because that's how stupid some of these premiers are acting right now and tonight. And the Prime Minister's given them 2 weeks to get their act together. And I hope for the sake of everyday Australians that act gets together real fast, because I don't want anyone to be hurt by this coronavirus. No, I don't want anyone to suffer a premature death, as somebody pointed out to me the other day. No, I don't want that. But hundreds of people did last year with a flu. And nobody did any of this sort of rubbish that we're currently going through right now. All off the back of the failure of the Victorian government to properly run the quarantining of people in hotels.